Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Box of Roses podcast. I'm Xander Rose, and with me, as always, is Alex Box. Boxy, how are you, mate?
I'm good, Xander. How are you going, buddy?
Good, mate. Good. We've got another guest here today. Our special guest today is the Deadly Shot, Kasai. Brother, how you going,
I'm doing very well, guys. Very well. Thank you for having me.
mate? Anytime, mate. Anytime. It's good to have you finally on. I know you've been, with COVID and that, the wrestling's been a bit quiet, but yeah, mate. How did you start watching wrestling? Or
Uh, just like anybody else, I think, 5 years old, and one day I was just flipping channels. It came on, glued my face to the TV, and never really looked back since. Yeah, I remember actually a friend of my mom at her old work about 20 years ago had all these collectible WWF like action figures still in their boxes, like mint condition. And I remember I was like 4 or 5 or something, and this is like late 1990s, and or maybe early 2000s. I'm not very good at maths, but whatever. And I'm a wrestler, not a mathematician. So he actually gave this to us because he was gonna sell it originally, and then he thought, you know what? My friends got kids, and me and my brother were like, oh yeah, we'd have it. We don't even know what it was, and then we saw all these action figures, and it's a shame because they were all mint condition, and when we got them, we just ripped the boxes open and played
oh,
with them, and and I've still got, I think all of them now. Like the Triple H's and the Rocks and all of that kind of stuff, and yeah, we pretty much watched it religiously not long after that, and then yeah, just skyrocketed from there.
wow, spewing that you took him out of the box, man.
Yeah, right.
I think
I
that's a
am
pretty
now.
clean. Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, nah, good
Yeah, I remember
stuff.
when I was like a lot smaller, and I was like I'd love like my wrestling figures. Every birthday, I'd get like 10 of them, and I'd rip them open straight away. And like now looking back, I have like 3 boxes just full of figures, and I'm like they're just sitting there collecting dust. Like it's so sad. They're gonna be worth something one day, and they're just it's really sad.
Well, you
Yeah,
buy
Um,
that's
you
right.
buy them you buy them to play with them or use them or whatever. So but only the smart people really hold on to them in the box. Don't touch them. Just leave them. And you know, 10, 20, 30 years down the track, they're worth a bit of coin.
Yeah, exactly. When I went to Japan, and we can get into all the Japan stories a bit later, but when I went to Japan and I went to a wrestling collectible store, and oh my God, the amount of action figures and just everything that was has been kept in the boxes that these people were selling, that's like some of it was over 50 years old, from like the 1970s. And the fact that they're selling it, and they were selling it for such good prices. I mean, everything I bought from there as well, like I bought like a Sabu ECW figure, and I still have it now, and it's in the box. And you know
Wow.
those that stuff still flies around every now and then, but you got to go across the world like Japan to really find them.
Yeah. Wow.
So you mentioned you started watching wrestling around the Attitude Era, which is what most fans would say is like the peak of the wrestling industry. Um, who was your favorite wrestler when you were younger?
So I know I watched it, started around that time, but honestly, I don't really remember the Attitude Era that much. As people would call it, the Ruthless Aggression Era. I would I have much more fonder memories of that. And growing up, it was Triple H. I was an angry kid, a very angry kid, and just seeing him come out every week with a band-aid over his head because he got busted open the night before, angry with a sledgehammer, threatening somebody. I just thought, man, this is the coolest guy in the world. Wow.
Yeah,
And
yeah. Triple H
yeah,
really had that like badass aura about him, where he'd come out with the water spit, and like everything about him was like this guy's really just gonna kick your ass and doesn't care about it.
yeah, exactly.
If there was one wrestler, past or present, that you could wrestle, who would it be and why?
It's definitely past. I mean, everyone that I wish I could have even just said hello to is dead now. I mean, Luthez would definitely be one of the guys. Billy Robinson, Eddie Guerrero. Um, mostly from the 70s and below, like the Luthers, Billy Robinson, uh, you know, even guys like Kyle Gotch, even guys like, Jim Londos, which is the 1930s. Uh, yeah, a lot of those, true, I don't want to say, um, okay, I'll say it, real professional wrestlers.
That's it. What made you though like watch the old stuff?
So the more I got into it and the more I would, uh, become almost like all of us, we're all crazy fans growing up. We loved it. We just wanted to get our hands on more and more wrestling. And as I was getting my hands on more and more wrestling, and I mean, thank God we live in an age where the internet is a thing, and it's only getting better day after day. New things are being captured from 100 years ago. I was able to find a lot of old documentaries and videos and matches and stuff online that most fans today don't even know exist. And even things just like the origins of pro wrestling and the roots that it has in catch wrestling. That road just made me go, oh my God, there's so much I don't know about pro wrestling. And there's so much that's underappreciated and misunderstood about pro wrestling. So, long story short, I would just go down to all of those archives and find all these different wrestlers and names, and a lot of them ended up becoming very famous trainers, like Hiro Matsuda, who most people know trained Hulk Hogan and Ron Simmons and Lex Luger, was actually a very dangerous catch wrestler from Japan, and he was trained by Riki Dozan, who started Japanese pro wrestling.
That's crazy, man. Like, I get what you mean about like old school wrestling getting underappreciated. I remember like I was watching some NXT UK stuff, and I was watching Tyler Bate and Jordan Devlin. I'm like, man, these guys are cool. Like, I wonder where they get all their inspiration from. And I was just like trying to search up some like old school British wrestling and watching like the British rounds matches. Johnny Saint and even like Dynamite Kid when he was first starting out, British Bulldog. Um, like William Regal as well when he was first starting out. Like that old school British catch wrestling is just like incredible. There's nothing
Can,
like it.
can I say? I actually funny you mentioned Dynamite Kid. Actually, today I watched a tag match. It was the British Bulldog, so Dynamite Kid and the British Bulldog, Davey Boy Smith, with against the Heart Foundation, and it was mate, it was
Wow.
so good, so ahead of its
Wow.
time. Yeah, no, it was really good, really good.
Yeah,
Bret
100%.
Hart with short hair, and he was wearing the black and blue, not the black and pink. So it was just yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was 1985, so it would have been 36 years ago.
Oh
So
wow.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah, it was brilliant, eh? And just to see Dynamite Kid the way he used to move, man. I'm telling you. Obviously, Chris Benoit was a big admirer of his work, and a lot of his moveset was from Dynamite Kid, but almost carbon copy, eh? It's unreal.
Mm. Yeah, even just the body language, the mannerisms, like they both were very muscular guys, and when you watched how, for example, when Dynamite and Benoit would do a snap suplex, you could literally see identically how they would turn to face their opponent afterwards with the same facial expression. I mean,
Oh,
it's
mate.
I don't really see it as copying. Like I hear a lot of people talk trash, like, oh, this guy copied this guy, but I don't know. I think that's the most sincere, genuine
Technique.
form of technique and
Yeah.
flattery, because it was Dynamite. Like there's probably a million guys that could do a snap suplex with precision technique, but to have that same impact the way that Dynamite had, and then to almost duplicate it, which we all know there's never duplications in wrestling. There is copycats in wrestling, but if there truly was a genuine duplication, it was Benoit, man.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Definitely. But do you still watch the current product now, like WWE, AEW, or
I do
other?
keep up with it. I don't watch it, if that makes sense. So I do keep up with who is, the guys on the show, who's, sort of getting the big name out there, and, what is, what's hot right now. I do keep up with it. I don't watch it religiously. I barely even watch it casually. Um, and that all comes down to, not that I think I'm better than watching it, but it all comes down to, now that I'm in the business for as long as I have been, which I mean, I still consider myself green, but there comes a time where you don't have to watch everyone's match on every single show, not while you're on the show. Like, you don't have to watch every single thing that's happening in wrestling to understand where the business is going, to understand what's hot, what's not, to really get a grip on that audience. And, if we're speaking completely honest, I don't like a majority of modern wrestling. So, it's just better that I don't give myself the headache, that I just, keep up with what's hot. I watch those who I do like, and I just make my own brand out of it.
I'm very curious to ask, who's on your Mount Rushmore of professional wrestling?
Oh wow. So okay, so I'll be honest straight up, because if we're when we're talking about pro wrestling, like, this is the way my mind works when it comes to pro wrestling. I'm a very some people have called me annoying when they talk to me about pro wrestling, just because I have such a different outlook on it, and some people have called me, oh, very interesting. I think I'm both. Pretty much because when someone brings up pro wrestling to me, I'm not thinking the same thing that they're thinking of at all. And I just know that for a fact. When I think of pro wrestling, I think of catch wrestling done as an exhibition. Whereas people would not think that way, because, I mean, let's be honest, no, there's maybe 100 catch wrestlers in professional wrestling, maybe, in the entire world, and the rest of them, don't know catch wrestling. So, but if we're talking about what the mainstream people would understand as pro wrestling, and what my Mount Rushmore would be of all of those different blends of people's perception about pro wrestling, you definitely have to have Eddie Guerrero. You definitely have to have Andre the Giant. You definitely have to have, I would say, Ric Flair, purely for the run that he had as the NWA champion. And last but not least, you definitely have to have, I would say, Antonio Inoki. Just because, if it wasn't for his ideas about what pro wrestling could be, how it could be presented, you wouldn't have a lot of people pushing this sort of a quote unquote shoot mentality in wrestling. You know, so you've got the Ric Flair, which is like the personification of, promo and selling tickets and a gimmick and a style and a profile, and the prestige of what it means to be a pro wrestler. And then you've got, Eddie Guerrero, which is just pure work ethic, pure talent, pure technique, pure charisma. Just, I mean, there will never be another Eddie. And then you obviously have Andre the Giant, who is just the spectacle of what this is. And if you notice about everyone that I've mentioned, as whether people know it or not, they all were legitimate wrestlers at the same time.
A lot of people will say that, Andre, he's dead. Obviously, he's a legend. Don't get me wrong, but what is it that Andre, like, for him to be in your Mount Rushmore? That's a big thing.
Okay,
Why
hold on.
him?
Let me just interrupt you, because I think, like, Undertaker came out with his Mount Rushmore the other day, and it was I think it was Austin, Rock, Michaels, and Andre. I think Andre was the guy who changed the game for the big guys. Like, I think without Andre the Giant, the Big Show isn't as successful, and Mark Henry isn't as successful, and all those guys who were built like that and had successful careers don't have those careers without Andre the Giant.
Oh,
Yeah, no, fair
100%.
call, fair call, fair call. I just like, yeah, it was just, yeah. Obviously, yeah, he's a legend, and the early WrestleManias and all that sort of stuff. I get it, but yeah, I was just like, I just wanted to know why you picked him. Like, what was the reason for that?
Oh, yeah. Well,
Um,
I would also add, I mean, Alex made incredible points, but I would also add that when he was younger and he was getting into wrestling, and I mean, he was the same, massive size. He had the same, big hands. The amount of speed that this guy was producing from his feet, and the amount of height he would get when he would jump, because people would forget he was a basketball player all the way back in France, so he was an athlete. It wasn't until his later part in his career where he was very limited because of the disease that he was suffering
Growth.
from.
It
Exactly.
kept growing.
But
Yeah.
in his peak, oh my God. I mean, even later in his peak, I mean, I'll bring up Antonio Inoki again. If people go back and watch those matches, Antonio Inoki versus Andre the Giant, they all thought, oh, Andre never took bumps, even when he was at his biggest and stuff. Yeah, no, he knew who to take bumps for. Okay,
Yeah.
just because
Right.
he didn't take a bump for Joe Blow, which is something everyone should start, really paying attention to. He took bumps for who needed for him to be taking bumps from. And when Antonio Inoki would hit him with big and Zaguri, trust me, he took a bump. I mean, so it's all those things, and that's why I bring up a lot of the older guys, just because, I mean, yeah, there are definitely veterans today, and definitely people who know what they're doing today, but I don't know. The more we just keep going towards what people have been conditioned to believe about pro wrestling and think about pro wrestling, I think we're never going to get back to the mindset that truly is professional wrestling. And that's from, 50 years ago. That's when it pretty much was great. That's when it pretty much was legitimate. And I would say even before that, it was even better when you got your Ed Strangler Lewis's, and I mentioned Jim Blondos before, and, your, who else was another guy? I'm blanking on the name. He was a New Zealand guy. He pretty much put New Zealand on the map. Oh, Pat O'Connor, that's it. So that's why I keep bringing up those guys, because those guys are my inspiration. And I'll let everyone else have the generic sort of, oh, I like this guy. I like this guy because WrestleMania. Sure, whatever. But when you step in the ring with me, I've got a different mindset, a different approach, and I think fans are usually very surprised and shockingly happy that they get something different of me.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Enoki because there was one match. I forget who it was. It was like this real rough guy, and he wasn't selling for Enoki. I'm pretty sure you would know which match it would be or who the wrestler
Yeah.
was.
Yep.
I can't think of his name now, but
Great Antonio.
right, and he wouldn't sell for him, and then he's just legitimately like hitting him in that, eh?
Yep.
It
He
was
he
pretty.
busted him open. He busted him
Yeah,
open.
yeah, and he deserved everything he got, to be honest.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
But yeah, and then he also, I think, Inoki also had a little match there with Muhammad Ali. It was a muck around match, but it was.
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah, I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure.
And the reason why people sort of have forgotten about that match is because if they had done the rules as they were supposed to, Muhammad
Inoki.
Ali would have been knocked out. People
Well, he
don't
was on the
realize
ground,
that.
Inoki, wasn't he, for most of the match? I
He,
remember.
he, yeah, because he had to be, because the rules, because of Muhammad Ali's people, they didn't, because he had a couple fights coming up, and they did not want Inoki to be able to shoot in on him or kick him unless Inoki had contact with the floor, with more
Oh
than
wow.
just his feet. So Inoki, basically had to do, like, imagine that. Okay, it's like, okay, you're not allowed to do your specialty unless your butt is touching the floor. So that's
Yeah.
why Inoki put his butt on the floor and started kicking him. And what people also don't realize is Muhammad Ali uh, ended up having his career shortened due to blood clots from the kicks that Inoki was giving to his shins.
Wow, I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah, that's a big
That's
reason why he ended
crazy.
up calling. Yeah.
Yeah. We should. You know what we should do? We should put that on the Facebook page, Alex.
I agree.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Pro
Yeah.
wrestling
Wow.
is legit. Pro wrestling is legit, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, to all the fans watching, listening right now, if you guys are always thinking, oh, pro wrestling is, whatever, please give our sport some more credibility because it has plenty. Okay, pro wrestling is legit.
I was going to ask you one thing as well. So, I mean, other than pro wrestling, what other? I'm pretty sure you do other combat sports, don't you?
Yeah. So recently I've gotten into Brazilian Jiu Jitsu about a year and a half, 2 years ago. Before that, when I started martial arts at age of 12, because I was too young to begin pro wrestling, so I started up Japanese Jiu Jitsu, and I got my black belt in that in 2016. And then after that, the more that Japanese jiu-jitsu exposed me to grappling, the syllabus that I was learning with North Star martial arts, the grappling was very limited, not in the technique, in just what they were pretty much showing us, um, because it stemmed from submission arts wrestling, which is a Japanese version of catch wrestling. But I guess, purely from a market standpoint, they didn't push teaching that much. It was mostly purely the traditional side of Japanese jiu-jitsu. But the more I would learn the grappling, the more I would be like, I want to learn more of this. And then, like we were talking about before, the more I would get into the history of pro wrestling. Both of them came and linked my knowledge and interest in catch wrestling. And then once I started doing more catch wrestling, I decided to pick up a jiu-jitsu school and also practice catch wrestling there along with learning jiu-jitsu. So yeah, so anything that's pro wrestling, catch wrestling, grappling, jiu-jitsu, it's all the same stuff to me, but I'm surrounded by it 24/7.
So when and where did you enter the pro wrestling industry? How did your career begin?
So I was supposed to wait until I was 16. I'm very impatient. So at 15, I lied about my age and went to the AWF School of Pro Wrestling. And basically, at the time, it was Jay Law and TNT Greg Bounds. They were together. TNT didn't train us at that time. It was pretty much just Jay Law. TNT was off doing other projects and things like that. So Jay Law trained us, and then they ended up having a separation, and then it was turned into the Australian Pro Wrestling Gym under Jay Law, and then Jay Law, also known as Lee Leslie, he just had a bunch of us that he was training, and we started doing shows, and that was in 2013. I signed up for pro wrestling, and in 2014 I had my debut match, and the rest is pretty much history. 2017 I traveled overseas for the first time. Before that, I had just done all domestic matches, Queensland a few times, Tasmania. Um, I did South Australia a few times. But in 2017, I went over to Japan with the Kaientai Dojo under Taka Michinoku. And then I went back again in 2018. And then 2018 and 2019, I also ventured off to America and wrestled in several different states, trained under Ken Anderson, Brian Kendrick. And yeah, I think I
That's
over answered your question.
No, that's fine. That's an incredible list of names. Like just Ken Anderson and Brian Kendrick. Like those are two really awesome guys to train under.
100%. Yeah, they definitely taught me a lot.
What was it like having Jay Law as your wrestling coach?
He was tough. He was tough, and I've never forgotten that. He was a very tough guy, and he not not necessarily from a well, definitely from a physical standpoint, because we weren't exactly light. I mean, we were snug in our training, but mostly from a mental standpoint, we did a lot of cardio. Uh, every time we'd show up to training, it was always something new. Okay, you pick up this guy, run down there, come back, do a bunch of push-ups, squats, pick him up again, come back. Like, it was always something new. There was always something creative about our workouts, and that definitely tested you mentally. And he definitely gave a good foundation for a bunch of us. Um, my issue with training ended up coming from I think I outgrew it, and I think that's when I ended up venturing off overseas and stuff like that. But he was definitely an excellent coach to begin with.
And your highlight of your wrestling career, it means so far?
Let's see. Well, purely from a vanity point of view, I would say wrestling on television, doing TV tapings of Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. I did 3 different TV tapings with them, and the amount of exposure that got me just from a bunch of different fans, just from a bunch, just even Matt Striker actually tweeted about me after my first
Wow.
appearance on Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, and that was something. I hate when people. I know I'm going on a bit of a tangent, but I hate when people talk about, oh, you're marking out for this wrestler, that wrestler. I don't really see it like that unless you're really just acting, like a child or something. But the
Yeah.
way I see it is, these guys we grew up watching, not for no reason. It's because they are in the spots that we all dream about going, and they made the money that we all dream about making. So for someone like that to notice me and then tweet about me, so pretty much tell the world, hey, this guy is doing good. That was a big deal for me. But yeah, just all the different roads that Championship Wrestling from Hollywood pretty much opened up for me, all different kinds of bookings and different promoters and different wrestlers and relationships and that kind of stuff. I would say wrestling on Championship Wrestling from Hollywood would be a huge highlight for me.
I'm disappointed. I thought you were going to say when that time when you came to training at VCW that Wednesday
That's
night.
that would be second. It'd be number two best.
That was the first time I actually met you, and
Yeah.
it was quite funny because like we trained there on Wednesdays there with the boys, and then I remember Zorba was like, "Oh, we've got this guy coming in and training." I'm going, I thought you were like a new guy training, and when I saw you in the ring, and I'm like, this guy ain't you, mate. Like you were like an absolute freak in there. I remember you were mucking around there a little bit with Villalobos, Andrew Villalobos there a little bit, Darius Vega.
Yep.
And he's all like wrestling. And I'm just sitting back going, man, this is pretty cool. Like he's very good. And then you actually wrestled about what 3-4 matches there for VCW?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's right on the money. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
and
remember I challenged for the cruiserweight title against the Prince, and he's a good talent. So is uh, Vega, as you were talking about. But both guys are very good talents.
if I have to be honest, like that night there when you were challenged for the cruiserweight belt, that was actually the best match of the night. To be honest, I remember watching it backstage there, and it was like, mate, it was just so good to see you both, and like your intensity, but also you're a high flyer. Everything you do with purpose. It's just your character makes sense. You got the mask thing going, and you really play that character really well. And I know you don't say much on the mic. On the mic, you're not sort of a promo guy, but I think that's a part of your character. But it's a really cool character, man, and I think you do it really well.
Uh,
And you're one heck of a wrestler in the ring. That's all I can say, man. But
well, that means a lot. Thank you very much. That means a lot. All I can really say is, that's just me. There's nothing fake about me when I go and do pro wrestling. It's the same when I do grappling or any other, combat martial art. It's all the same to me. So, I just happen to wear a mask in one of them.
In 2017, you got to wrestle Frankie Kazarian, who is someone who had a massive influence on the independent scene in America and is just an overall veteran of the industry. What was that experience like?
It was great. It was very good. That was actually the week after I came back from Japan, so it was definitely a good time for me at that moment. I just had just come back from Japan after a month of training, hard training. Made my debut in Japan, and then to come back and to be almost okay. Well, now I get to wrestle Frankie Kazarian. It was pretty cool. It was definitely pretty cool. I wish that we had as many intelligent promoters in this country as we seem to have some wrestlers. People can take that as a dig to whoever they want if they want to. But there should have been a crowd. That's pretty much my only thing about it. There should have been a crowd there because I liked the match. I enjoyed it. I thought, I showed Frankie that there's there's something in Australia, and not just me, but there's a bunch of guys in this country that, we're just itching to show how good we are, and yeah, so that's pretty much the only thing about it was it put a bad taste in my mouth just because there wasn't not a huge crowd there, and at the end of the day, I didn't give a damn how good your match was if nobody's there. It sucked. So
if you don't mind, who was the promoter?
let's see, it was the we were talking about copycats before. It's the copycat of Stone Cold Steve Austin, and he's considered to be 5-star Flash. He's a good guy. He's a good guy. I don't have a problem with him personally. I just have a problem with his work. That's it. And I guess people take that personally, but I don't care.
That's it. We're here to speak our mind, brother. So whatever it is, and that's how you feel, and that's what we say.
That's
I
exactly
mean,
right.
yeah. I mean, look, you were saying a little bit about like obviously you want to, you know, make it into the industry, and you've been following, wrestlers who've made it, and all that sort of stuff. I mean, for yourself, for the future in terms of your wrestling career, where do you want to be? In the future, in company wise, or if you want to go overseas or Japan, Australia, whatever.
So honestly, the way that I just take it as, especially now with the way that the world is, you know, I'm pretty much just taking everything as, whatever comes my way, I'm just gonna, use it. So if this booking comes my way, then okay, yeah, here we go. Obviously that doesn't mean I'm just gonna wrestle for every which way, Obviously you got to pick who you work for and stuff like that. But every opportunity, I'm not one of those guys who exactly has a plan, but I do at the same time. And I know I'm, again, confusing. It all makes sense in my mind, but when I say it out loud, it's like, oh, this doesn't make sense. But so I'm pretty much, yeah, I would love to wrestle all over the world. I've already wrestled in 2 countries. I want to add as many flags onto my sleeve as I can. But at the same time, I don't have the traditional way of thinking about it. Like, oh, you go to this place and you get signed, and then you do this and then you do that, and it's whatever. Like I said, I really value catch wrestling and traditional real grappling when it comes to pro wrestling, because that's what it was. And I would love to go down both paths to where I can show people, hey, look, this stuff is real, and I can do my grappling events, and I can, win tournaments and things of that nature. At the same time, showing that, hey, this thing is legitimate, pro wrestling is real. And yeah, it's not really much of a career. It's more of a message that I would prefer to push in my lifetime. Which I'm not the only guy. Believe me, I'm not acting like, oh, hey, I'm the only guy doing this. Trust me, there are so many other wrestlers in the world who are also catch wrestlers, who are also jiu-jitsu guys, who are also, kickboxers and judo guys and whatever, that are pushing the same message in their career, which is, pro wrestling is legit and you can't fake real.
Lastly, do you have any tips for any young people who maybe want to get into the industry?
I would say get thick skin, as thick as you can, and make sure that if someone tries to cut you, that it doesn't phase you. Don't sell it. Because at the end of the day, for a business that is fake, and I know a lot of people don't like the F word, fake, but it's fake. We have a lot of people who pretend like it's real in a bad way, if that makes sense. And that means that you gotta, deal with a lot of people who, you wouldn't in your everyday life because it's not worth it. But you have to deal with them in pro wrestling. Now, from a pro wrestling standpoint, that's a backstage politic nonsense garbage thing that just is inescapable. But from an actual pro wrestling standpoint, what I would say to people is learn your craft, become a master of being a student, learn how to learn. Pick the brain of as many people that actually know what they are talking about. Do not be afraid to go up to the guy that had a contract somewhere, to go up to the guy that traveled somewhere, to go up to the guy that is really good and pick their brain and try to understand why they're so good, and just become a student of it. Honestly, that comes back down again to being thick-skinned. You gotta just go for it. When I went to Japan, there was no guarantees. I went there with my girlfriend, and we had no guarantees at all. We never heard a response from Takamichi Enoki before we left, and we thought, who cares? Let's just go. Let's just knock on the door and see what happens. So you have to take it like that, because if you don't, you're going to be that guy with your thumb up in the ass at 80 years old going, what if? Screw what if. Just do it.
Yeah, just make sure at the end of the day, like no stone was left unturned. You know what I mean? So
Exactly.
that's the most important thing. Having no regrets. Give it your best, and at least you know then afterwards, this is it. This was me. I gave it my shot. I did my best in the gym. I did my best in the ring. I was friendly to people. All that sort of stuff. Yeah, and that's it. Really, you can only do what you can
Exactly.
do.
And there's nothing else to it, honestly. I mean, people might think, oh, you're a failure if you didn't do X, Y, and Z. I don't look at it like that. I look at it like, what have you actually given to pro wrestling? I think we are all responsible for the business of pro wrestling. And, I don't want to go on for too long on a tangent or anything, but that's the way I view it is every single time we step into the ring, we are representing what people view as pro wrestling. So if you are not entering that ring in the best that you can possibly be, or if you're not on the road to being the best that you can possibly be right now, then you are doing pro wrestling a disservice. So I don't care what your dreams are, I don't care what your aspirations are. Pro wrestling comes first. And if it doesn't come first, then you need to pick something else. Because someone like me or someone else, we're not going to be too nice to guys like that who think about themselves and their dreams and their aspirations and their, blah, 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 whatever. You represent pro wrestling when you step in that ring. So if you don't give it 100%, you're the reason why fans say this is fake. You're the reasons why people say, "Oh, pro wrestling's nothing." You're the reason. And if people want to contest me on that, I don't know, email me.
Yeah, no, I think it was really good advice. As someone who would love to get into the industry, I'm definitely going to take that on board.
No problem. And I just want to say one thing actually. So someone like you, Alex, who like you said, you want to come into the industry. I know this isn't a question, but to the guys already in the industry, help each other out, okay? If you see someone struggling, don't let them go out in front of an audience and be shit. Help them out. Make sure that they are prepared and ready to represent the same business and the same sport that you are going out there for. Okay, because if you're in the main event and you think, oh, I'm in the main event, I can do whatever I want, I can treat anybody however I want, everyone is beneath me. Guess what, man? Every single dude that just went before you, if they're crap and you let them be crap, what do you think the crowd thinks of you? You're the main event of crap. So help each other out.
That's true. Good words there, brother. Good words.
I think that wraps us up for today. Kasai, thank you for coming on. It was a
Thank you,
really,
brother.
really good chat. We really appreciate it, and it'd be great to have you on again.
I would love to come on. Yeah, any time. Yeah. Even just to talk about the history of pro wrestling, which I love speaking about, I'm a student of this thing, man.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, like our YouTube. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. We'll see you next week.
Catch us later.